Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Moed Katan daf Chavav, we're going to begin on the last two words on Chaf Hey Beis. Tanraban. Ve'elu kiroyin shein misachen. These are the following individuals that after you rip the garment, you do not mend it back together. Hakareya al aviv vel imoy. First of all, if a person rends the garment because of his parents, then you do not fix it. Ve'al rabo shalimdu Torah. If you have a teacher that taught you Torah, same thing. Vel nasi vel bestin. So when it comes to a nasi or bestin, you have to tear kriya, and also you cannot fix it. Vel shemuay sorois. If a person hears bad tidings, vel birchas Hashem. If a person hears someone cursing Hashem, vel sefer Torah shenisraf, or a sefer Torah is burned. Vel are Yehuda vel hamikdash vel Yerushalayim. The person encounters these things as well, so then the din is that you rip the garments. A korea al mikdash umaisiv al Yerushalayim. You rip upon seeing the base of mikdash, and you're maisiv upon seeing Yerushalayim, of course, in its destroyed status. So how do we know you're supposed to rip and also not fix? The Elisha roya, so he saw vu mitzaik, and he screamed, Avi, Avi, Rechav Yisrael Parashav, Avi, Avi, Ze Aviv, the Imo, Rechav Yisrael Parashav, Ze Rabbi Shalim de Torah. So it's referring to his Rabbi that taught him. So, my mashma, can Matargim Rav Yosef, Rabbi, de Tav L'hoin L'Yisrael. You are better, L'Yisrael B'Saluse, with your davening. Mer Sichin, Ufroshin, with your horses in your chariots. Voimis achin manoan. So how do we know not to fix up the garment afterwards? So manoan dechsev v'chazik b'vagada v'karim l'shnayim, that you held onto the garment, you ripped into two. Kuroim amash m'shnemar v'karim eni yodei shnayim. So obviously we know that it's mashma you rip into two. So why does that have to say you rip into two? El Mulamid Shikruim Oimdin Lishnayim, Oilim, the remains ripped. Amr Rish Lakish Rav Yochanan Eliyahu, which was his Rebbe, Chayhu, is he alive? So Amalei Kivan Dechsiv, the pasuk says, V'loy Rahu Oid L'gabi Didei Kamestami. It's comparable to him being dead. Nasi V'av based in Ushmoy Sarais Manoan. How do you rip also for these individuals or bad tidings? That David held onto his garment, and he ripped it, as well as everyone else that was with him. They eulogized, and they cried, and they fasted on the Erev. Al Shaul v'al Yehonasan beno, regarding Shaul and Yonasan his son. V'al am Hashem v'al beis Yisrael ki nafal b'charev. At the very end of Shmuel Aleph, we find that Shaul died fighting the Pelishtim, as well as Yonasan. And when David heard this news, some say it was Doeg that came back. There's different Mefarshim exactly who it was, but in the beginning of Shmuel Beis, David was informed, and he ripped his garment. Shaul said Nasi. So Shaul was also the king. He's like the leader. So he was the Nasi. Yonasan ze'al bestin, because he was like the second al am Hashem. Vel beis Yisrael el shemu sarais. When he heard about all the other people that died in battle, that's also bad tidings. Amali Rav Bar Shabal Rav Kahana ve'ema adi havikuhu. Maybe only if all the things happen together, not on each one. So Amali al Hifsik Indian. The fact he kept saying al is a reason alone to tear kriya. Umi karina and ashmois harais. Do we actually rip for bad tidings? V'haimer le was Shmuel, who said to Shmuel, Katel Shvar Malka, that Triyaser Alfe Yehudoi, that there was 12,000 Yidden that died. Bimzigas Kisari Fulkara. Even though there was so many people that died, he didn't rip, even though it was bad news. So Lo Amr Ella Beroiv Tzibor. It's only said Beroiv Tzibor. What does that mean? Rashi says Rov Yisrael. If the majority of Klal Yisrael dies, or a tremendous amount dies, then you will tear. Ukamasa shahaya umi kato shmor malki Yehuda. Is it true that he was responsible? The Armale Shmor Malka Shmuel, the Shmor Malka said to Shmuel himself, Teisi lidulkati Yehudim Ma'ilam. Shmor Malka said, I never harmed a Yid. I never did anything. Right? I never did anything. So Hasam inhu garmal nafshahu. He actually caused this for himself, says Rashi. He did kill them, but his claim was that it was justified. Says Rashi, Demardube, they rebelled against me. V'hadi karmelu katli Yehudi, that I didn't kill any of them. I didn't do it for no reason. But certainly Shmor Malka was responsible for killing them, but he felt that he had a right to. Hasaminu garbidel not lanashe, it was basically justified. Diomer Rav Ami lekol yiseri de mezigas kesari pakashvura delukia. Rashi says this large noise, lekoil kinairos shemardu, regarding like this loud noise of harps, that they came and they rebelled. That's why I killed them. Al birchas Hashem anolin dechsev yavo el Yokom ben Chilkiah asher al habayis v'shevna hasayfer v'yoach ben Asav hamaskir el Chizkiyahu kuri begadim. So when they heard the cursing of Hashem, the birchas Hashem, so they ripped their garments. Echad hashomeya, regarding the curse, whether it's the one who hears it, ve'echad hashomeya mipi hashomeya chayav lekroa. Even if it was like through hearsay, you also have to rip your garment. But edim in chayav lekroa. But if you're witnesses that testify that this person did it, then they don't have to rip. Shkvar karu b'shashishamu, because they already ripped their garment when they heard it. So now that later when they testify against this person, they don't have to do it again. B'shashishamu maihavi haka shami hashta. What do you mean? They're hearing it again. That when Melech Chizkiyahu heard this, the Yikras Begadav HaMelech, he ripped the garment. Kara HaMelech Kara v'heim lo karu. They didn't. V'lo misachin menalan. How do we know we don't fix the hem? Ase kriya sefer Torah. So it's Gzer Shava. Sefer Torah shnis menalan. The sefer he ki kara Yehudi shalosh delasais. V'arba, when it was called to the Yehudim, 3 delasais, which are referring to psukim, v'arba and 4, v'yikureha, and it was ripped, betar hasoifer, like by the gate of the scribe, v'hashlech el ha'esh, and was sent to fire, asher el ha'ach. My shalosh delasais v'arba. So Amle Yehoyakim. So Yehoyakim, who was the king, said, Kasav Yirmiyah Sefer Kinais, that he should write these books of this book of Lamentations. So Amrulhu Maiksibe, Echi Yashvu Badat, Amrulhu Anam Malka. He said, I'm a king. Amrulhu Bachot Tivke Belaila, Ana Malka. Galta Yehuda Mi'oini, Ana Malka. So he kept saying, I'm king. Darchet Sion Avelus, Ana Malka. Hayut Sarehel Raish, Amrulhe Man Amra. So he said, who said this? So Ki Hashem Hoiga Al Raiv Pishoeha. So he kept saying these different psukim, which perhaps infuriated the king. Miyad Kadar Koil Askara Shaba. He ripped out all of Hashem's names in it, V'sarfan be'esh, and he burnt it up. V'hainu nechsiv v'loy pachdu v'loy karu espigdehem. V'chlal debo lemikra. Which is mashma that you need to rip. Amar le rapapul abai emar mishum shemos harais. Maybe it's not because of the Torah, but maybe because of the other bad things, as Rashi says, Al Hagolus Iboy Mikra, because we were exiled. Those bad tidings, did it take place at that moment? No. So therefore, it was because of the Torah that was burnt. If you see a Sefer Torah that was ripped, so you also have to rend your garment. Shtei kriyos, 2 times. Echad al hagvil ve'echad al haksav. So let's look at question 13. Eze davar mechayev shtei kriyos uma hatam. What requires you to rip twice, and what's the reason? So it's talking about a Sefer Torah that it says shenikra, means shenisraf, that if a Sefer Torah was destroyed or burned, so you have to do 2 kriyas, one because of the gvil, and one is because of the ksav, the fact that the letters were destroyed and also the parchment was destroyed, so therefore you have to do 2 kriyas. Shenemar, achri sarf melech has Megillah, after he burned, this is referring to again Yehoiakim, he burned the scroll, Vyasa Devarim. So therefore, it was the Megillah and the Devarim. These 2 things you have to do Kriya for. Rabbi Abba, Rav Huna Bar Chia, Haviyasvi committed Rav Abba, Ba Lafnuye. So they needed to go to the bathroom. So Shakle Latotafte. So he took his tefillin and Achte Abe Sadya, and he put it like on the side over there. Ase Bas Ni'imata. So a bird came, Ba Lemisbele, and wanted to literally swallow up the tefillin. Amar Hashda Yichayivin Li Shtei Kriyos. Now, if this does this, I'm going to actually have to do 2 kriyos, because it will have destroyed the gvil and the ksav. Amrli Menolacha, how do you know? Well, B'didi Havi Uvda, the tefillin by me got ripped. V'asol Kimid Rav Masna V'li Havi Biyadei. He didn't basically know what the psak was. It's only by the zroa, says Rashi, she'ein yochel hatziloi, that you're not able to save it. Ukamas shahaya dehayayakum, avol denamita, when the matzil hatzil will mikra. However, when it comes to a bird that takes it, and possibly you could somehow get it back, so then you don't have to tear kriya. Ar Yehuda min Nolan. How do we know if you see the city of Yehuda, you also tear kriya? D'chsev yavo anoshim mishchem mitzilo mishimrain shmoinim ish. There was these 80 people. Gulche zakan ukru begadim. It says their garments were ripped. Umisgaididim uminchu vayna biyadam. Lahavi beis Hashem. So they were bringing these offerings to Hashem. Amrav Chelba Aimer Ula Bira Amrav Elazar Haroy Ari Yehuda B'churbanan. We're talking about, of course, when it's found in its destroyed status. Ari Kachacha Haya Midvar V'Kaireya. The cities of holy cities it's referring to, and you ripped. Yerushalayim B'churbana. Omer Tzion Midbar Hais Yerushalayim Shemama B'Kareya B'Kareya. Beis HaMikdash B'churbano Omer. Beis Kadshenu V'Tifartenu Asher Hilucha V'Osenu Haya L'Srifas Eish. V'chol Madehu Haya L'Charava V'Kareya. So you actually will say these certain sentences, and then you rip the garment. Kareya al Mikdash, you rip upon seeing the base of Mikdash, umoisif, and then you just add a little bit more al Yerushalayim, or which mashma you don't do a separate kriya upon Yerushalayim. Or minhu echad hoishmei v'echad haraya, someone who hears or sees. Kivan shegil seifim, once you reach seifim, kareya you rip. The kareya al Mikdash. Bifnei atzma v'Yerushalayim bifnei atzma. It says beferish you're supposed to do separate kriyas for both of them. Lokasha had the paga b'mikdash bereisha, had the paga b'Yerushalayim bereisha. So let's look at Rashi. Kigon shenichnas Yerushalayim b'shida teva migdal. You entered into Yerushalayim in a box. D'lo yira Yerushalayim ad shira beis hamikdash. You're stuck in a box, and they brought you straight to the beis hamikdash. Karel mikdash u'maisev al Yerushalayim. You first rip on the beis hamikdash, and then Once you're out of the box, you can now rip about Yerushalayim. If you just happen to walk into Israel and go through Yerushalayim first, okay. Tanur Rabban. All these cases, you are allowed to mend the ripped garment back together. So basically, you could do whatever you would like to do and make it back to one another. Rashi says, "Shein malakdin zeh samach lazeh, avol zeh rachak mezeh shvelakid b'rachayv kein milos solamus." Just like the rungs of a ladder. So you can put it back, but maybe not necessarily exactly as it was. Avoloi la'achai son. You can't mend it back as it was, but you could mend it back to some level. Rav Chisda, as we continue Chavav and Beis, Rav Chisda, he says, Uve'ichui el Cassandri. What is that? So Taisa says, Yerushalmi ezu ichui kol shein mikoimo nicker. Something which is place is not recognizable. Something again is a little bit different. Tanaban hakareh mitoich hashalal. A person rips it, except on the actual seam where there's the stitching, so you haven't fulfilled your obligation of kriya. It has to be like on the actual material where there's no stitching. You have to rip that part. If let's say you ripped it afterwards, then you are yatsa. However, when it was sewed, it had to be an unusual tear, unusual or not the normal way of sewing it back. So a person is allowed, Rashi says, to turn the tear down, and flip it around, from bottom up. So basically, if you like, you can just turn it around and you can wear it in that way. Rabbi Shimon, and you can sew it back up. Rabbi Shimon Lezer, oiser lachaiso. He says, no, you're not allowed to do this. Ukashem shehamaycher aser lachaiso kachol kech aser lachaiso. Just like a seller is not allowed to do this, so too a buyer cannot. Therefore, you have to let the buyer know that in fact that it was ripped and it was resewn, so that's not a mekach tois. Taraban techilas kriya tefach. Originally, the garment has to be ripped at least a tefach, but toisefes shosh etzba'is to Rameir. In a situation where you only have to do is a tosefes, so the din is it has to be 3 more finger lengths. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Tchilas Kriya Sholosh Etzba'is. It's actually only 3, but Tosefes Koshu. That when you add to it a little bit. So Omer Ul Halacha Krameir B'Kriya. The halacha is like Rameir when it comes to Kriya, that it's a tefach. The halacha Rabbi Yehuda b'Tosefes. However, we hold like Rabbi Yehuda that only need to do is Koshu. Tani B'Hachi Rabbi Yossi Omer Tchilas Kriya Tefach v'Tosefes Koshu. Which again we hold like both shitas. Which again, we usually are more hold like the makel, but over here, again, we require it to be initially a tefach. Tanaban, Amrulo Mace Avivikara. Let's say a person was told that his father died, and you tore kriya. Mace Benoi, and then his son died, V'hoisif, then you add to it. Tachtoin Misacha. Let's say the bottom part was mended back. Elyoin Eino Misacha. The top part is not mended back. Says Rashi, the top part Shikar al Aviv al Imo. Because we said you're not supposed to mend back for your parents. Meis Beno Vikara, let's say first you ripped for your child. Meis Aviv V'hoisif, so Elyon Misacha, Tachton in Misacha. Again, it's for the same idea that if you continue to rip it further down, so the bottom part now cannot be remended because that was ripped for the sake of the parents, and that can be fixed. Meis aviv, meis imo, meis achiv, meis achoso, karea kera echad ukulon. If all these different people died, basically, let's say at the same time, you do one ripping for all of them. Behuda ben Beseira Omer al kulon kera echad. All of them you do one. Al aviimo kera echad. However, when it comes to your parents, you do another rip. Levishein moisifin al kera of aviimo. We don't moisif kriya on your parents. My Thomas Amram Nachman Yitzchak Levisheinu b'toisefes. Because your parents are not considered to be like added. They need their own separate kriya. Omer Shmuel halacha Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Halachas like this. Umi Yomer Shmuel hachi again. Yomer Shmuel halacha could be hamekel ba'avel. I thought the halach were more lenient. So why do we have to do another kriya for the parents? So avelus l'chud kriya l'chud. You're right. When it comes to kriya, which is interesting, we could have asked the same question between the tefach and the three etzba'os. We asked the question here. Fine, and the question is, so l'chayra, you're supposed to go make by avelus. So one is the element of avelus of mourning. This is an action of kriya. By kriya, we can be more machmer. So ad heichen kaireya. Until where do you do this kriya? So on this, the Gemara says ad tiburai, literally all the way up to your navel. The Yesharim ad libo until your heart. Alpha Yishen Rayel Davar Zechadavar Shnemar V'yikru Lavavchem V'al Bigdechem. You should rend your hearts and not your garments. So it shows that the ripping is by the heart. Hagiwa Tiburo, once you reach the navel, Marchik Sholosh Etzba'is V'kareya. You should distance 3 tvachim and then rip. Nismale Mulfanav, while the front of the shirt is ripped, Machziro Acharib, you can turn it around. Nismale Milmala, if let's say it's in the front on the top, Hayvchal Milmata, you can put it to the bottom. Hakarel Milmata, if you rip from the bottom or from the sides, you're not yatsa. It actually has to be at the top. El Shekain Gadol, Pyrim Milmata. When it comes to a Kain Gadol, he's Pyrim Milmata from the bottom. Okay. Pligu bo ramasa rav ukva tervayim mishmei avud shmuel v'levi chad omer kol shiva, all 7 days. Kaireya, you have the ability to rip. V'achar shiva, if let's say you didn't do kriya yet, so moisif, then you could add, you should just be your moisif. V'chad omer kol shloishim kaireya, for 30 days you rip. The achar shloishim moisif, and then after the 30 days, that's when you're moisif. Question 14. Someone died. The kara, and this is referring to someone died, you did kriya, and then someone else died. Ha'im kareh love od kriya. Do you have to do another kriya? Or shahaisav al rishayna, or do you just add to it? So l'chadman de omer toich zayin. This is what it's referring to. If someone died within those 7 days of you sitting shiva, kara acher, then you rip. Acher Zayin, Moisvel Rishayna. If you only find out about it after the Shiva, so you're Moisef. The other one says it's totally on Shloishim. If you find out before Shloishim, you do Kriya, otherwise you're Moisef. Mask Rav Zero, Mandi Omer Kol Shiva Kaireya. The one who says that you do a new rip within the 7 days, Amai, Delo Nitain L'Sholo. Why don't we say that during the Shiva, you could Hemet Elohadiyamar Isha Shalalto Alter Hachinami. We said Afil Taich Shiva, even within 7 days we allow them to Hemet. The Hasamishim Kavod Ishahu. The only reason why we allow her to do that is because of Kavod Isha. Says Rashi V'lumin Adin. It's not because it's really technically what should be done, but to show Kavod we allow her to do it. Mandiyamar Kol Shoshim Kareya, 30 days is the time. Amai delo nitan lachaiso el abav imo delo nitan lachaiso olam hachinami. So hasam yishim kavaydu abav imohu. Again, because of covenant of the parents, we never rip, we never fix it. Tanabana hayotzi bebeged karua lifnei mace. If a person goes out with a garment that's ripped in front of a mace, Harizeh goizel es hamesim v'esachayim. It's comparable to someone who is literally stealing in front of dead and the living. So what does that mean? So bebeged karua kaidem before this goizel hakoil shemarama hakoil shemar lehem shikar mace. In other words, you already had the garment ripped, so it has the appearance as though you actually ripped it for this mace, but you actually had it ripped before. So it's goizel mason because you're giving the impression that you actually did it for this person, but you really didn't. A person who says to his friends, "Hashilenu chalukcha," let me borrow your shirt. The elich, and he goes v'yavaker es abba shu chayla. He visits his father who's sick. And he finds out he died. So he rips the garment and then he has to fix it. He gives him back a shirt, he gives him back the value of it to rip. But he doesn't let him know, then he can't rip it. Now, as if someone is sick, don't tell him. So fine. If let's say you have a chayla that someone's mace died, ein moedinoiso shemes shema titarv daitalav. So this is an unbelievable idea that if someone is sick, don't tell him that his relative died, because it's going to make that person feel even worse. Fine. Ve'ein mikarin b'fanav, and don't rip in front of them. U'mishatkin es hanoshim mipanav, and do not literally kiss in front of them. U'mikarin l'katan mipnei agmas nefesh, or again tearing because it will cause agmas nefesh. V'karin al chama v'al chamaisim mipnei kavod ishto, but for your in-laws that died, you can tear. Papa tanu ba'avil rabasi, avil yaniach tinuk b'tacheikai, an avil should not put a child in his bosom. Neshim avilu de schaik, the nimsa misgane al habriyos. So the person, because babies bring joy to people, so by you holding the baby, it shows that you're actually taking away from this notion of being in avelos. Okay. Let's see a couple of questions. We'll stop here. Question TA17. Kamahu shir tchilas kriya, v'kamahu shir hatoisevas kriya l'halacha. So we said that the shir tchilas kriya is a tefach, shir tosefes is kol shehu. So we end up saying it's like two different shitas. That's TA17. So we end up saying like one shita and like the other shita, so that is the din. TB. Okay, we did that. Katan.